So I'm here with Brad Emery, who's been a member of Resurrection for the last...
Just over a year.
Just over a year. Okay, so just over a year. And he was interested in sharing something of his story. I thought that it would be an encouragement to many people watching. So, Brad, can you just tell us who you are, how long you've been in Hong Kong, just sort of the basics of your life? Is there a family, that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. So I'm 48 at the moment, coming up 49 in June, married to Christine, and we have an 8-year-old Mercedes who a lot of people will sing around church.
Yes.
Christine is my third wife, more of that later.
Okay.
I've been in Hong Kong for 20 years.
Okay. So a long-termer here.
Yeah.
Well, what brought you to Hong Kong? Tell us about your life here for a lot of that 20 years.
Yeah, I came initially to work for Prudential, a life insurance company, and they wanted to start a bank, and my background was banking in the UK.
Okay.
And literally it was one of those, a phone call out of the blue, do you want to come? Yes, I'm up for it, and got on a plane. It was all very, very fast and very sudden. And we thought probably for a year or maybe 2 or 3 max. The bank idea folded very quickly, and I ended up doing insurance stuff, which again I think is fairly typical in that industry. And really flying around the region, doing deals, and it was a very high pressure, long hours, lots of travel. That was probably the first 8 years of my career. Then I had a little bit of a break, did some stuff on my own, burnt through all my savings, didn't do very well at that. And then went to work for AIA for a few more years doing, I built their wellness program for them.
Okay. So, a lot of travel, high profile stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. Earning a good amount, that sort of?
Yeah, I was definitely a top 1% earner by the end there. So.
Okay. And that was, where does that bring us up to?
I left AIA in 2016.
Okay.
About 4 years ago.
Okay. And can you tell us a bit about the period from 2016 through the next few years there?
Yeah, maybe rewind a little bit sort of earlier than that. So whilst I was coming towards the end of my time at AIA, I got divorced from wife number 2. Wife number 1 was before I came to Hong Kong. Very difficult, and I think losing my job was part of that. And then when I came out, having gone through the divorce and then basically being fired just after that, was very bitter and very upset, and sort of blamed everybody in the world but myself.
Okay.
Which again I think is fairly typical in those scenarios. In the divorce we had joint custody agreed, and I'd taken on an apartment that was probably a bit too expensive so that the kids would be disturbed less, go to the same schools. All of that stuff, so I was left carrying all that overhead, and so I lost my job in the February. In the June, July, my ex-wife took the children to Taiwan on holiday and never brought them back again.
Oh my.
So we spent about 2 years fighting through the courts in Taiwan, burned what was left of savings and redundancy money, trying to fight the custody stuff there, and lost. So lots more sort of recriminations and blame. Everybody else's fault.
So that must have had a huge emotional impact on you at that time. And I mean, what was going on in life during that? You said it was a 2-year struggle. What was going on with you during that time?
So, I mean, Christine was very, very supportive. Obviously, initially we weren't married, we was dating, but she was great. She ended up actually being my legal representative in Taiwan, so she was very good for sort of emotional support. But I found myself drinking more and more, very, very excessively by the end. And haven't had a drink now for 27 months. So
well done.
That's been
good.
Positive. But clearly got to a point where I realised that I couldn't fall any further down that road.
It sounds like there wasn't a faith stuff going on in the past.
That's a fair question. I grew up Christian, and I was very involved with the church at university, and I was baptised at 21.
Okay.
And it was interesting, we've talked about this before, but if anybody had asked me at any point in the journey whether I was a Christian or not, I would have, and in fact did say yes.
Yeah.
But clearly there was a period in there where I had turned away from Christ and his teachings completely,
Okay.
to the point that when this guy witnessed to me, it was quite a revelation. And when I started going back to church again, which, again, more of that story later, I was quite confused for a while as to whether I needed to make some kind of recommitment or get rebaptized. And so that was quite a difficult thing, that sort of coming back to faith.
Right. So there's a bit of a background in the Christian faith, but not something that really had any impact on the way you were living,
Certainly
what
not
you
at
were
that
thinking.
time.
So tell us about this chap who spoke with you. It was in a car journey.
Yeah, so he was a Malaysian, his name was Tim, and he told me about how his marriage had fallen apart, and he'd been drinking a lot, and he'd been adulterous, and he'd lost his job and his savings, and was broke and miserable, and then somebody had taken him to church, and he'd turned his life around, and very much gave the credit for that to Christ. And a real open, heartfelt conversation. It wasn't sort of, it didn't feel manufactured at all. It was just him talking.
Okay. So it wasn't a sales pitch in any way. It was
was
just him sharing his story. Okay. And so he had that conversation. That resonated with you. Take us from that car journey to going to church for the first time? Or?
So I started praying more or less immediately that evening.
Okay.
There were other people in the office who were Christian, and so I went to a couple of churches with people there. I ran across an old friend that I knew from the bar scene in Wan Chai, who himself has quite an amazing testimony. He was a drug addict and was involved with the triads, and fascinating story. So he actually took me to his church, and I felt more comfortable there than I had in a couple of the other churches that I'd been to. So I stayed there for, I guess, about 18 months or so.
Okay.
And then we moved to Sai Kung, and the church was in Salmon Ho, and I stopped going because it was just too far on a Sunday morning, particularly when the commute from where we are into town is tough enough when you're doing it 5 days a week. So I pretty much stopped going. Was still at that point quite comfortable in my faith, comfortable enough to be speaking to people about it.
Okay.
I was involved in a support group for startups, and one of the other committee members was involved at St Andrews.
Okay.
So he knew Ian, who was the interim pastor before you came, and was coming over to a service with the Bible study group he was in to support Ian, and asked me to come.
Right.
So that was my sort of first introduction to Resurrection Church.
Okay.
And initially thought it's not the most convenient location, although obviously it's a lot better than where I was going.
Sure.
But I did get off my butt and go back the following week. Just over a year later, and I'm still there. So I think it was a good thing for me that Benson made me do that.
Okay, so talk to me about this past year. So you've been at Resurrection for about a year now. How have you seen yourself growing? How have you seen yourself changing? What's been the causes of those things? Tell us a bit about that.
So initially, when I came to the church, I was coming every week, and some people made me feel very, very welcome. I don't need to name names, but there was a handful of people who would say hello every week and make sure they said goodbye and make sure I got a coffee and a cookie and what have you. But I wasn't really very involved with the church at all. I was just coming on Sundays. Right. And there was a pivotal moment after you and Catherine arrived. You and I went for a sit down, I'd say a drink, but obviously I didn't drink, at a pub, and had a chat. And you'd said to me about, do you want to do some Bible reading with me once a week or something? And I was probably petrified is the right word at the prospect of committing to that, and I think politely excused myself. But just after that, we've been having coffees and teas at church every Sunday, and I was always early because of the bus time, and the summer came, and I think it was Catherine who had a chat with me and said, we'd like to keep it going, are you willing to help? And that was my first sort of, I guess, service to the church, was helping with tea and coffee on a Sunday morning. And it was great because I got to meet everybody. I mean, suddenly people knew who I was, and I knew who a few more people were, made some friends, And that was a big thing. And then I think a little while after that, I'd said to you, is there anything else that I can get involved with, or anything else you need help with? I think might have been the way that I put it. And found myself doing Bible readings at church and a couple of other activities. And I found every time I do something in service to the church or in service to the Lord, it brings me closer, it brings me more reward and a sense of well-being and those other things and obviously it's helping with my faith. We go back to the story about asking me to read the Bible every week, and now I'm reading it every day as we follow through the Bible readings on the app.
We're reading the Bible every day together on the same program along with a few other people. We have a WhatsApp group, we're chatting to each other. That's a lot more than I initially asked you to do, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I'm enjoying it.
Good, yeah. That's the important thing.
But also the Bible study group, which initially was once weekly, and I think people would have seen in the newsletter, the dinner that we had, where people, despite the difficulties in Hong Kong at the moment, a good sized group of people made the effort to come and see me off, which was wonderful.
But we've had a great time together in those Tuesday evening meetings, I think, as we studied Nehemiah, we studied things about evangelism, and I feel like that's where I've really gotten to know you and where others have gotten to know you and each other. And if you could just put a few sentences down to say, here is the way that I've seen God growing me in my faith, or seen him revealing himself to me, what are the sort of suggestions you might make to someone who's thinking, okay, well, I mean, it sounds like good things have happened for Brad, but where do I start? What kind of things might you say?
I think my discovery has been that the more I move towards God, the more he moves towards me. It's like not a meeting in the middle, but it's a two-way thing. It's not a one-way thing. And when I've found things maybe that you or other people have asked me to do difficult, I've prayed about it. We had an example the other week, I think, where you talked to us about praying for somebody that maybe was an enemy or had done something to hurt us. Which is not an easy thing to do, but actually it's quite healing for yourself to pray for that person that you maybe don't have the best feelings towards.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's been a number of things, from starting to go to church to praying regularly to maybe even studying how to pray.
Yes.
And the more that I learn, the more I feel close with God.
Okay, Brad, so we had a bit of a technical difficulty. Some of the video was cut off earlier, and obviously we can't hide that as you're wearing a new t-shirt. So
if anybody thinks they're going nuts, you're not. I had to go and move some of the stuff for the move tomorrow, and thought it would be polite to change.
I do appreciate it. My sofa appreciates it. But the part that got cut off was we were talking about what comes next. So I was saying, basically, are you just riding off into the sunset? It's happily ever after, and now everything's sorted in life? Or
if only it was that easy. We've still got lots of issues around the move, and obviously they just announced yesterday that coming back from the UK there'll be a 2-week quarantine, and I may need to come back several times. So there's challenges. We've got challenges with banking, challenges finding a house that will accept the pets. There's all sorts of things, but what I'm finding is that I'm much more able to deal with it and much more trusting that God will find the solutions for us. And if he doesn't, it's because there's a reason. So, for example, if I was stopped from flying to the UK tomorrow, there would be a reason for that. We believe that everything is lined up just perfectly for us to go, and that it's God's will for us to go. So.
And in terms of you're moving, so you're not going to be part of Resurrection Church, at least on any regular basis in the coming years. You won't be seen around. If you were able to say something to the people of Resurrection Church, what might you leave us with?
Obviously, thank you for the people that made me welcome when I first came, and for those of you that have been praying for us and supportive of the family over recent months. It's very, very much appreciated. Keep welcoming the new people and keep telling your stories. The thing that Tim did for me was so important, and it's important that we all do it for other people.
Well, Brad, thank you so much for sharing something of your story with us today. I hope that's been helpful for some of you watching. God works with each of us in different ways, and He will speak to us in ways that we can understand. And I'm so happy to be able to share something of the way God has been at work in your life with the rest of the congregation, indeed beyond the congregation. So thank you.
Thank you.